I just like if there's one thing I hope to see in this year, 2026, it's more companies taking seriously the constraints and the ethics that they need to put around AI. That's my hope.
As bleak as the outlook looks regarding that, I do think the
Mm,
pendulum is swinging the other way. There is quite a lot of backlash at the moment around unethical corporations. I think people are growing quite tired and sharpening their guillotines. So I'm hopeful.
Chris's prediction is like a social revolution in the style of the French.
all, Guys, all we need to do is eat one billionaire, and the rest will fall in line. I promise.
mm.
One of us does it, and then the other person says hello, and we can do it the other way around. I think that works for you.
Sure. Let's go for it.
Hello, and welcome to System of Whatnot, the podcast where we explore how the world's most interesting teams organize themselves to get stuff done. I'm Kit Friend from Accenture, and this is.
Chris Cook from Atlassian.
There you go. Are you? Wow, that's new. Okay.
According to LinkedIn.
Okay. And welcome to our very first episode in this new kind of season of Things guest. My friend Emily Sauter, the CEO, founder, entrepreneur par excellence. I suggested was a good job title of a new way forward. Emily, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you guys for having me.
Good. And what's this new way forward thing that I mangled your job title around at the beginning?
What is this thing? So a New Way Forward is a consulting company. I basically founded it based on all of the best things I learned in my, 20 plus year career at Accenture, plus a bigger focus on neuroscience, plus a huge focus on being human in the era of AI. And it's a lot of ex consultants who have left big companies and want to do really meaningful work.
Awesome stuff. And we got a preset, like iterated set of questions. It's we'll disrupt things partway through, I'm sure, with things. And uh,
I have no doubt this will be slightly disruptive, and I am really here for it. I'm
we,
ready.
we, let's start with the planned stuff at least we go. So I'm obviously interested. You made it all the way to the top of one of the world's most cutthroat and pressured businesses that Chris
Mm.
always teased me about being part of. And as you just related, you've got a bunch of colleagues with a similar background. Like, what do you miss, and what are you happy to be rid of from that kind of world of corporate loveliness?
I mean, I think the thing I'm most grateful for in the 20 years that I spent at a big consulting company, it was really all the opportunities to learn and grow. Like, I didn't expect to go into consulting. I was actually an entrepreneur at university, and I did a couple businesses and sort of thought, this isn't for me, and I really need a job, and I want to move to Chicago. So I went down the route of consulting because I knew I would learn what makes big companies tick and where they would win and where they would fail. And that's what I got. And I do think I really miss all of the, although they can be very painful, all of the opportunities that were presented to me to adapt and grow. But I really value the agency and the flexibility I now have in how I work.
Yeah, it's the classic one, isn't it? I remember feeling privileged after a couple of projects when I realized that I was getting into contexts where, like, especially early in my career, as you reflect with things, I just don't think I'd have been in those organizations or launching those really cool products with things. And then as
Mm,
you grow, you get more comfortable with things as well.
that's
Um,
true.
and I guess trying.
Just
Oh,
quickly, opportunities to adapt and grow sounds like a
Mm.
euphemism for some incredibly stressful situation.
That is true. And you cut through the consulting language right there. Yes. Some very incredibly challenging situations. Yeah. There's nothing like consulting to push your personal and professional development.
is it not like sport though, where you have to go through painful things to get the big gains? I feel it's like exercise is like microscopic muscle tears, isn't it? So you have to
Yeah.
do those painful things to get something out. Chris looks really
Yeah.
upset at the idea of tearing your
No,
muscles.
Nah, I mean, speaking as a 2 foot tall, 6'7" in American giant man, I've grown without any of that stress. I'm fine.
Uh,
Mm. I mean, it's definitely a mental health and emotional health game as much as it is like a a cognitive and work game. You got to really, to succeed in consulting, you have to really be solid in who you are and what's important to you and how you work. And you have to know when to be adaptive and when not to be. And it's really more of a neuroscience game than it is anything, I think.
Oh wow.
Mm. It's interesting actually. So, Tim Edmonds, one of my much mentioned colleagues in the UK, he ran a well, not a podcast. It was more of a sort of community meeting internally called Dry Blood School, where it was about architects sharing their mistakes and what they'd learned through things. I think he borrowed it from someone else, but like that learning from failure thing is really important, right, Emily? And then I
It
guess
is.
we're here to talk about ways humans organize. Like, what failures have you witnessed in humans getting together and maybe attempting to organize themselves?
I mean, so many, like so many. And I think like it's especially in the consulting world, what happens is you get companies that come to you with really big problems. And they come to you because they have some trust that you have expertise or tools or experience that will help make sure they solve this problem right from the start. And yes, you do have tools and expertise and experience, but often these problems are still brand new and it's something that, you've never done before. One example I'll give you is in my consulting career, there was a CTO that came to the consulting company and basically said, look, I have this really wild idea. I want to design and develop and implement the world's first 5G completely cloud-based network. And I'm starting from scratch. Could you do it? And I remember at the time, I think it was Omar Abash was a leader at Accenture, and he basically said, you know, I have no idea how we're going to do it, but I have faith that we can. And he actually brought probably some of the smartest people I've ever worked with from around the world together in, Tokyo and said, okay, guys, I don't know how, but we're going to work together. We're going to be a really solid team. We're going to be really collaborative, and we're going to figure this out. And we did. So I mean, I've seen it done like badly a lot, but I think when you're humble enough to know that you can get to the answer, you're just not sure how, and you're going to pull in all the right people and you're going to trust them and listen to them, and you're going to do the really hard thing where it's like take multiple ideas and find a way to bring it together and implement it really well. Like it can be done really well, but I've seen it fail a lot as well.
Mm. I think I was drawing to a group I was teaching the other day the typical sort of burn up chart of a delivery. And obviously the
Mm,
ideal line, everyone's like, right at the beginning, yeah, we're gonna get there and accelerate like a rocket ship. And every real project, unless you're gaming something, flatlines for the first few weeks whilst everyone faffs around and gets used to working with each other and discovers all that stuff, right? And it's stark. And I know there's all the kind of trite stuff around storming, forming Norman, but it's just true, right? You need to kind of get the people together to start around things before you can
yeah.
achieve any semblance of organization.
The human behavior part is usually always the hardest, right? So I love that you mentioned the storming, norming, because there was a while where I used to use that terminology a lot at work. And then there was a while where it became really wanky and everyone rolled their eyes. But it is true. When you get humans together, there's a bit of needing to get to know each other that has to happen. There's a bit of trust that needs to be built or rapport. There's a bit of intimacy that you have to create as a team. And then you have to be able to be really honest with each other about how you want to work. Like one of the things I actually learned from Atlassian was as a human creating your user manual that says, hey, this is who I am. This is how I like to work. These are the things that work well for me, and these are the things that don't work well for me. And this is what I really appreciate when I'm working in a team. And that was a way of getting to know the people around you. That was just like, it was authentic, but it also helped others understand the best way to work with you. For me, that made a huge difference when it came to teaming and collaboration.
I've never asked Chris what should be in his user manual. Chris, what would you put in your user manual? What instruction book have I not read that I should have done?
Yeah, no, it's a good one. Like I've realized I hate threads in Slack. I really hate them.
Style of communication, yeah.
But I've,
Mm,
I've learned this from like sales in that everyone, you meet people where they are. So if the best place you get a reply from someone is LinkedIn, that's how you message them if they're a WhatsApp person. And then I just applied it to leadership and was like, look,
yeah,
this
that's
person prefers to pick up a phone call and just talk it out. This person never do that. They will quit if you do.
yeah, that's very savvy. That's about adapting your style for the people you're working with. And I would venture to say the majority of leaders in the corporate world don't do that. They expect everyone to adapt to them. But
Yeah,
the leaders who
they
do
have
that,
policies and rules, right? They're like, yes, we're a Slack
exactly,
organization, and okay, fine. But if that's not
exactly.
how
That's
people are
actually
happy working,
that's a good call out. That does make a big difference.
It's an interesting one, right? Because often, rightly or wrongly, I'm in a role where I'm trying to stamp a behavior on sets of people en masse, right? Get teams working in a similar way and doing stuff. Your discipline is fundamentally a one-to-one one, right, Chris? And like Emily, probably somewhere in between, depending on who you're helping with
Mm,
things.
but you have to start there, right? So I think it's fine to even at scale be like, okay, let's try this. You have to try and fail before. So yeah, if you just forever let everyone do whatever they want, at some point you have to herd the cats. so,
Mm,
so try a thing, try and implement a thing. If it doesn't work and that team finds they prefer to work in another tool and a system, then okay, can we
mm.
adapt for that? Can we compromise?
I have a pretty, I don't know, provocative view on what leadership should be.
Nice.
Like, and part of it is bias because I worked in the corporate world and I was always, in the words of the people that gave me feedback, a little too authentic, a little too friendly, a little too caring, a little too empathetic, a little too compassionate, right? But the way people responded to me, whether it was clients or my team, was always really profound and different from the way they responded to other people. And I've sort of been observing, at least for the last 10 years of my career, the leaders that really empower and motivate people to change and do beautiful, amazing things. And they tend to be the ones that no matter how powerful or high up they are, there's a bit of, I want to get to know you, I care about you, empathy, compassion. But that's so rare in these corporate systems that we've created. And we're actually, weirdly enough, rewarded and recognized for not being that way, for being as much like robots and AI as possible. But, and part of why I founded my company is I think that human element is more important than ever. And that's really where you see change and innovation and growth happening is it's usually tied to a leader who does have clarity and compassion and courage and actually cares about the workforce.
mm. It reminds me of the I don't know if either of you read the book Sooner, Safer, Happier, which it got very fashionable a
No.
couple of years ago in delivery circles and things, and I really like it. I'm going to make it sound a bit wanky, but it's actually very down to earth. But there's a whole section around what makes good leaders, and they contrast the sort of leader as commander, like Roman centurion kind of legion sort of thing, versus like a Sherpa, and that sort
Mm,
of like thing, and like. I can't work out to make it sound like I'm not reading from like a kind of Hallmark card or something, but I really like that kind of Sherpa sentiment of like guiding the people, but not being like, do this now around things when you talk about something where if you look back on like people that you've been like, yeah, that person was a really good leader. And I think they've all had that thing of like not giving you everything, but being there to kind of support you on the journey.
like the ability to identify it in someone, to ask the right questions, to help them realize that they can do it, the ability to give them a bit of coaching and guidance, but like sort of letting them get there their way and having confidence that they can do it. Like your ability to bring out performance in individuals like that is incredible, but no one's trained to do that. We're much more trained to dictate and tell and demand and reprimand. It's wild.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
so
mean,
persist.
it starts with our first job. I always say, like, people's first job is you're working for someone that's intentionally chosen to hire the youngest, cheapest people possible. So it's a very bad first impression of the workforce, right? And you're then being managed by a 24-year-old who they don't know what they're doing either, and so yeah, and we all just end up suddenly bumbling along like, oh, I guess this is how it is. And if the first time you have a transformatively good leader, it's mind blowing. You're like, oh, work doesn't have to suck. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
And I mean, I do just want to say that being a leader in today's world is incredibly hard. Like the amount of pressure and the decisions. And I was a bit shocked when I became a managing director. I was sort of like, oh, wow, I didn't really realize it was going to be like this. Um, and that's why, and part of even the methodology that I use now in my business, like I really think it starts with as a leader, you have to be your best self and you need to have practices. And I don't know if you're going to therapy. I don't know if it's just you have a great personal trainer, but like you need people that also guide you and help you to be your best self. And that's where leadership starts. If you're, a leader and your nervous system isn't regulated and you're all over the place and you sort of aren't very conscious of how you're showing up and the legacy you're leaving behind, how can you be expected to lead? But, leaders are under so much pressure. The last thing they do is invest in themselves and make time to be their best selves. So it's this sort of this weird conundrum now where we need human leadership more than ever, but we've created systems that actually make being a human leader incredibly, incredibly hard and difficult.
Where do you start with most leaders? And like, are you being asked in by like a CEO? Like, who asks you in? And like, what's the first thing you do to try and help them like on that journey?
Well, ironically, speaking to two lovely British men, um, I'll come back to tea in a minute, but the first thing I do is just ask to have a tea with someone. Uh, and I spend a bit of time getting to know them, and in particular, really understand the legacy that they want to leave behind. I find that question draws out very quickly what someone really believes is important to them and their purpose in this world. And that's where everything else has to start from.
I find your choice of tea really interesting. Is it like the brewing time? I feel like the being forced to sit with things
Okay.
is a healthy break and stuff.
Okay, let me tell you about tea. So, a couple things. One, I did a leadership retreat last year when I was sort of searching and deciding what was going to be the best way for me to redirect my career and serve my purpose. Because I was like, oh, maybe I'll join an industry HR team. Maybe I'll join another consulting firm. Maybe I'll do my own thing. And during that leadership retreat, there was actually a medicine woman who had studied under like Native American tribes who, did a couple different, I would say, like practices with us. And one of them was a tea ceremony. Now, I am not a fan of tea. I'm more on the American, like hardcore coffee side of things. But we sat in nature and we sipped this tea, and this tea came from really ancient trees in China. So it has this incredible effect of giving you clarity while you're very centered and relaxed. And I just felt like for the first time, in a while, I found answers to questions that had been circulating in my head for a while. Like the tea had a way of just clearing the noise, helping me be grounded in the presence of others and start to really see things clearly. And also, tea is not something you have with a robot. A robot can't drink tea. Artificial intelligence can't drink tea, at least not yet, maybe one day. Tea is something that humans have shared for a really long time, right? Like you have a cuppa with your grandma, you have a cuppa at work, a quick tea break with some biscuits. Like as humans, it's something we do to come together and just sort of have that like breath and that sigh and, just be present. And that's why I wanted to sort of embed it into like my practices and, who I was going to be as a business because we don't do enough of that. And so that's where I wanted to start every relationship and every project with just that calmness and that grounded moment of sharing something that's really human.
It's quite telling, isn't it? The manic anxiety of coffee. If you look at how coffee makes you feel, it's slightly urgent, slightly manic, and that
That's right.
reflects a lot of
That's
businesses and
exactly
how they're
right.
run.
But I think
Yeah.
are you a tea drinker, Chris?
No, no, I'm definitely a coffee drinker.
Yeah. So we've got three. I'm a coffee drinker, so we've got three coffee drinkers on a call talking about the value of
Talking
drinking
about
tea.
tea. I thought surely you guys would be tea drinkers. Don't you have to like drink tea to get your citizenship or something?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a vicious stereotype, Emily.
We were born with citizenship. We didn't have to fight for it, but I imagine those applying need to learn the rules of cricket and drink tea.
Makes
And
sense.
do you find any interesting patterns in what tea leaders choose when you sit down? I feel like it's one of those things where you can diagnose someone's personality type via what leaves they pick.
Well, I don't really give leaders choice. I sort of arrive with the tea and I don't always disclose that we're going to be drinking it. And I've had some reactions. Now, I do feel consent is very important. So I do let them know that there is a purpose to why we're sharing tea. And, I talk a little bit about why I've selected that particular tea because of its, ancient roots. But yeah, some people look at me very strangely. Some people aren't phased at all. I get a lot of different reactions.
I find more and more like I'm really against the Pareto principle, and I find the more people that are trying to speed run their way through communication and like efficiency, and you're like, but that 80% is really important, right? Like
Mm.
you can't just cut out all the team building and the communication and trust and empathy and all the things that someone maxing would be like, oh, that's inefficient. But you're like, no, 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 that's that's the game. That's the whole
So
point.
funny that we cut out all the things that matter, don't we, in the corporate world? Now, I
Chris,
will say the tea thing can often be a little bit awkward because in the beginning, I don't speak very much. I usually have a couple sips and wait and, create some space before the conversation begins. So it does feel slightly uncomfortable in the beginning, but I always end up getting a really good response at the end.
Wow.
it's really interesting that line between being an amateur psychologist and being a kind of consultant around things, isn't it?
Mm.
Do you feel, do they start to twitch a bit in the silence if you have people where you haven't prompted them?
Yeah, because and I do that for a point, right? As executives, we do not allow any space. We are meeting, meeting, email, email, grab some coffee, chug it down, back to
Mm.
work, back to work. And it's so funny when you start to introduce space, how uncomfortable people get. And
Mm.
even for me, I mean, when I left my, corporate career, I took some time to just have space and it was incredibly hard. Like I wrote a to-do list. I think it had 40 items in it. And my executive coach was like, maybe the point is not to have the to-do list. Maybe the point is to just be still and see what happens. And I was like, what? What do you mean? So even I can relate to how uncomfortable that can be when you start to build space into your life.
It is a bit awkward when all these like management courses and things actually have a point, isn't it? I remember one of my community, Chris Wagner, went on a coactive coaching qualification. And I was like, oh, that sounds really absurd and sort of cerebral, but he needed some guinea pigs, and so I volunteered as I always do for things. It was amazing. He went through all these
Mm,
exercises and things, and like it was very like pick an object near you. What would it say about these? It was actually really interesting. So it made me realize that maybe I shouldn't be quite so cynical around like those techniques and things, even if it's easy to make fun of them in a way. Yeah.
yeah, I think mindfulness has really changed my life. Like just being thoughtful about breath, being thoughtful about being present in the now. I'm still not very good at meditating. That's still something I continue to try to do, but it really has helped me stop being reactive and being like a very agitated, anxious version of myself and just be really thoughtful. And I have my best ideas and my best interactions when I come from that really grounded, present place.
We live in tough times where like there's a lot of cynicism towards that, and I think
Mm,
and I see why, because there's a lot of influencers cringing on LinkedIn about it. But the truth isn't that sad that like the best I heard it said was my favorite game master Brendan Lee Mulligan is an incredible improv comic, and he said when you start doing improv, there's this moment where everyone gets really awkward because they're like, oh, this everyone's like really nice to each other and supportive. Is this a cult? And he's like, isn't that tragic that you found a nice supportive group and your immediate assumption is there's something weird going on here, and we just end up so cynical of all the positive things that we're like, what's your angle here? What's the edge? Why are you giving me tea? What do you want, woman?
exactly. I mean, one of the best things I've heard about like I guess being a leader is the importance of being inwardly sound first and then being outwardly focused. So it's that balance of if I feel inwardly sound, I'm not going to bring my baggage and my drama and all this stuff to, how I'm interacting with people at work. But at the same time, you have to be really focused on what's happening in the market, what's happening in your business, what's happening to your team. And that balance is really tricky for a lot of leaders to get right. But starting with mindfulness is a great place to begin to just start building that inwardly sound environment that allows you to do everything else really well.
Well, I think the most worrying I've seen it is sometimes people get this wrong and they think being balanced and calm and a leader is about always being calm in a storm. And that's it comes across so weird when things are going wrong and then someone's pretending they're okay. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? The difference between being calm versus like being okay when it's okay and also acknowledging when things aren't okay.
Yeah. I love Adam Grant. Listen to a lot of his podcasts and I've seen him live a couple times. He often says something where, if you look at a room of people, there's always going to be somebody that's just talking, like they just don't stop talking. And we all think that's the best person in the room to be a leader. But according to, I don't know, science and, academics, it's actually the quiet person, the one who's really listening. That's the best person in the room to be a leader. Um, but man, it's hard to sit in a room full of executives and, be grounded and present and listen.
Do you think our organizations like give those quiet people the actual paths up to be leaders? 'Cause I feel like the loud people get rewarded in performance rounds and things, right? Where they get boosted up, and the quiet people maybe not so much.
Yeah, I don't even think I have to answer that because I think we all know.
Uh,
We all
are there
know.
flipping it round? Are there any organizations that do reward like the quiet people that you've seen? Like where have you seen the quiet people succeed? And organizations actually pick the right leaders.
Well, I will tell you like one shift I've made in my career recently because, for 20 years I was working with big enterprises, like brand names that you would recognize around the world. I've now shifted to, I'm starting to work a lot more with smaller businesses, especially businesses where, founders have a really big influence on what's happening in the business and the culture. And there I've seen a really interesting new type of leadership where I don't think it's about being necessarily quiet. Like, I haven't really worked with a lot of founders who are, mm, what's the word? Not actually, well, introverted, but they are introspective and
Mm.
they are more intuitive. And I think they do that because they feel such ownership of their business. Like this is something that they've created. And there's this, I guess, more fluid interaction that they have with their business that I didn't see in enterprises. It's not as hard and rigid and fact-based and, about analysis and metrics. And it's like they sort of are much more intuitive about what they want. And it's much more about creation and they have such a direct impact on their workforce and what happens. And that's been really beautiful because I've always known that the number one thing that matters the most if you want to transform a company is leadership, how they show up, what they do. There's no other change management tactic that works. And organizations that have, crappy leadership, the only thing you can really do is get rid of them and bring new leadership in. But seeing it in these smaller ecosystems has been incredibly beautiful. And I think there, people who are not full of ego, not the best storytellers, not super extroverted, can really succeed and create these incredibly beautiful companies. So that's been a lovely realization for me.
Yeah, I was recommended a really good book called Small Giants by Nick Muldoon from Easy Agile, who Chris will know is a lovely human being. And
He
the
is.
the
He's so
tagline for Small
happy.
Giants is, yeah, he's a lovely guy, lovely and insightful and wise. So the tagline for Small Giants is companies that choose to be great instead of big, and it's an
Mm,
amazing book. And I love when you hear the journey of each of them going through that thing of going like, do we need to keep making money or getting more staff or whatever the choice is on growth, or is there something different that we're going to choose around the way? And they pick their way of kind of staying or focusing in different ways, but there is that commonness of like a feeling of connection around things that I think is really
mm.
interesting.
I will read that. I would love to read that.
And we spoke about like kind of first jobs earlier, which I'm interested around things like what was your first job, Emily? And like, do you think that's had an impact on how you approach work later with things?
I mean, I think I've been working for as long as I can remember. Like I was a babysitter and I was a dance teacher and I was a photo girl when you still had to like develop photos at the drugstore, which by the way is popular again, which makes me laugh. I loved that job. So I'm thinking like maybe I'll go back and do that again. Even in college, I worked while I was studying, I worked at a pottery shop. Um, I started a retail business with a friend of mine. And then I started, working in the corporate world for a consulting company. So I've always worked. I see work as being a really important part of who I am. And I love creating, I love producing, and I love working with people.
It's good for the soul to be doing something, right? They often talk about when you're planning your retirement to not properly retire, but to have like something where you're kind of going back and doing those things. What was your first job,
Yeah.
Chris? Were you always a salesperson?
No. It's funny now how people perceive me. I was a scuba diving instructor, but quickly worked out that why work for someone else when I could just, yeah, I already have everything I need to teach diving. So I was just going
Mm.
around and putting posters up inside different condominiums and apartment buildings. And so, yeah, we would teach privately that way. And then even like my first sales job, it was just because no one else wanted to do it. And it wasn't like I was, always this gregarious, extroverted monstrosity, but just it needed doing. No one else wanted to do it. So I was like, okay, I'll put my feeling of shame on hold for the team. And then suddenly just became very, very good at selling because of that. I just saw it as an acting job. I was like, okay, I'm going to,
Mm.
because I did not feel naturally comfortable approaching people in the high street and trying to sell them something. So I was like, okay, this isn't Chris doing it. This is salesman Chris doing it. And so it was just
Yeah.
that classic fake it till you make it.
It's a good tactic. I use that a lot. Like, and also like visualization, right? Like if you have to do something you don't want to do, sure, pretend you're someone else and do it, or just visualize yourself doing it. That's like, it's a really good tactic.
Mm. When you're giving leaders these tips around things, Emily, like how do you help them broaden that zone of impact to like the others around them? It's like, okay, so we've sat with Janice, the CEO of Health Inc., and like sorted her out. She knows herself. We've got those things there. How do you help Janice like bring that sense of mindfulness and calm to the 10 headless chickens in the boardroom around
Mm.
them?
All right. Well, I've already spoken a little bit about like, how when I work with leaders, I really focus on them first. But especially when we're talking about artificial intelligence, I also spend time with them making sure that like they're very clear on what artificial intelligence is and it isn't, that they understand all of the opportunities that they have in front of them, because it's not always just about, you know, efficiency and productivity and reducing costs and letting go of people. It's about a lot more than that. And I talk about that as being clarity. I help leaders have clarity of themselves and of, the opportunities they have and their guiding principles. And I think that step is really important because when leaders role model what they know about AI, their openness to AI, um, you know, the opportunities with AI, like that's the first step, in my opinion, of bringing it to the workforce. But the second part of my methodology is about compassion. Because what I find is the people at the top, it's been a long time since they were actually on the floor doing the thing that makes the company money. So there's different sort of activities or practices I would use to help those leaders get back into the shoes of what it means to be on the front line of their business and build that compassion for their people. So it's about understanding, what's the day in the life of my workforce? What are their feelings, their needs, their wants? And sometimes it's even like job sharing. Like I might say, okay, look, we're talking about artificial intelligence opportunities for your marketing team. When's the last time you sat down with your marketing team and just observed how they work or spent time with them? All right, great. We're doing a half day, job sharing activity. Let's go. So that's the next step, is like building that compassion. And then from there, you make decisions about what AI are you going to use? How are you going to implement it? And you give people the opportunity to actually experiment with it. So you do it together. And I have found that if you have clarity of yourself, clarity of what's available, clarity of how you're going to make decisions, compassion for your people, you're experimenting with your people, and you're giving your people agency in how they're going to use AI, like adoption just happens. And it's not just adoption, it's like passion and excitement and motivation, like all these emotional things start happening. And it's done in a way that's very grounded and collaborative. It ends up being just really a lot of fun.
Right? But if your team is smiling and having fun, that's at the root of lots of great innovation and productivity, right?
Well, I mean, and Kit, like that's, always why I loved working with you, right? I think people who are authentic, people who bring fun to everything that they do, people that aren't afraid to like get their hands dirty and experiment and play a game and, like that's what work should be like. Why do we make work so boring and awful? It can be so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I feel like I still remember one of my roles earlier on in my career, and my career counselor, the person leading me, going like, "Oh, you can't assume that every job you are going to do is as fun as this." I was like, "Well, I'll probably leave then." Like, what a terrible bit of
What's
advice
the
to give someone
point?
around
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Uh, but I genuinely think it's right because if you want people to go the extra mile, which we all do in our teams, you always speak about wanting people to be there. Well, it's probably best to ask them to do that in pursuit of something that they genuinely care about and enjoy doing,
Mm,
right? Not filling in. Well, in my case, my wife who's upstairs at the moment loves spreadsheets. She's an accountant, right? Or works in finance. Her idea, but my idea of hell, having to fill in some things,
Sure.
uh,
totally,
I'm a big fan
totally.
of the theory that sort of like we learn through play, and I think the more you can apply that, um, and if not all jobs can be creative, I don't know. Maybe there is some creative spreadsheet people out there. Hit me up in the comments, but I think
I mean, I just think
if
the reality is, sorry, you go ahead and
no,
finish, Chris.
no, no. If you can do something with passion, you have a much bigger chance of finishing something that your customers care about or your team cares about or whatever, right? Like, so for me, it just seems like that energy that will multiply. Like I
Mm.
think if you're doing something with dread and ticking the boxes, you'll just end up doing a very average, boring, dry job that won't really help the world or your company. If it's not fun, what's the point?
I mean, and the reality is, right? Like we now have an opportunity that no one has seen in the past and we may never see again, which is we have this thing called artificial intelligence, which can free up so much time and capacity for humans. It is, in my opinion, a really unique opportunity to do more of what you love, have more fun, you know, free up more of your effort and energy for whatever lights you up, follow your purpose. Like it is such a profound opportunity to do that. The issue is that most people aren't thinking about it that way. They're really still thinking about it about, opening or optimizing work, making work seamless, being more efficient, removing humans. But if we think differently about it, we could actually be creating a workplace for ourselves that is incredible and is full of growth and innovation and creativity and play. And that's actually why I really focus on the artificial intelligence side, not because I'm wanky and it sells and, I enjoy adding to the artificial intelligence slop that you see everywhere. I'm passionate about it because I really think it is the most incredible opportunity for humans. We can actually create workplaces that we love.
Yeah, I'd like to double click on that because I think the shame has been like the first wave of influencers are just like, oh, look, now we can create loads of content. You're like, the world doesn't need more social
Mm,
media content. I promise you. This is not a slot machine. Please come up with better ideas for it. Thank you.
you
yeah.
do worry that how many organizations are going to take that opportunity to create an awesome workplace, though.
Because,
It's like
yeah,
I'm like I want them to use it to take away the drudgery. I fear that they're going to use it to audit my expenses more efficiently.
but it's the shift, isn't it? Because you go from iteration to revolution, and so the organizations that are used to just incremental, slight maximizing of optimization aren't the ones that are going to change the zeitgeist and change the paradigm. And that's the problem. We're hearing from so many people who just are trying to improve things 0.1% day to day, and
Mm.
it's like, nope, it's a paradigm shift, and we have not yet worked out which direction we should be running with it yet. But the people who are speaking about it are like, oh, this could make things 4% more efficient. You're like, that's not what it's for, dude. I'm sorry, you haven't got the point yet.
Yeah, and I also I try to be very self-aware, and I know that I am an optimist to the extreme, positivity seeping through, my pores. Like I am much more of a dreamer and, positive thinker. I do know that the reality is there are going to be use cases with artificial intelligence where it's going to automate things. To your point, Kit, it's going to, do a better job auditing your expenses. Eventually, it will, displace humans from certain jobs. And I actually think that's okay. Like there is a role that it needs to play in helping us be more productive and streamlined at work. But once that's done, then what? And, you know, I think there's a really so many leaders would come to me and come to some of my peers in the corporate world and say, all right, well, how do I be more productive with AI? And my point of view is that's actually the wrong question to answer. Or like the question should be, what do you do when you are 90% more productive and efficient because of AI? What projects have you left on the shelf that you never pursued? What innovation, what new business models can you get into? How can you be more creative? And I understand that this is how it works. Whenever there's a wave of new technology, there are certain areas people immediately focus on, and corporations all have a bottom line, and they have to keep shareholders happy. So I'm not naive. But I just am really hopeful that we can start to shift the conversation more towards the other side, which is about growth and innovation and, human potential.
Start by educating the leaders does feel like the best place to do it, right? If you can get in there before they direct things in a weird way.
Yeah, and there are a lot of companies that are experimenting with AI already, and a lot of them are having some pretty massive fails that become very public. We are still figuring out where AI is, best placed to take on work. Like, I don't think any company has figured out the mix of human and machine yet. There are a lot of people that are, early adopters that are talking about how they've become AI native businesses. There are some people that are using it completely now for customer care and eliminating teams, but like none of us really know yet where the sweet spot actually is. So I often say I think every business should be aware of the opportunity. Every business should be experimenting with the opportunity. But, as much as you're experimenting with reducing costs and becoming more efficient, experiment as well with ways you can use it to become more innovative and, get more revenue.
And I don't know if you've both been keeping tabs on the evolution of Maltbook over the last couple of days with the AIs having a social
I
forum.
I actually was going to ask you guys before our chat if we were going to bring that up or not, and then I just decided I would wait and see what happens. But yes, of course, of course.
I mean, it might have a new name by the time Chris manages to AI edit this podcast into to being with things, but like
So
very interesting. Like
does
I kind of, I'm suspicious of it being real. I'm like, what if it's just some AIs writing the forum around things?
I mean, we're living in the dumbest timeline. Like, if any historical record survives this period, they're like, okay, here's what they did, guys. They trained AI on Reddit and Twitter. And were they
Mm.
surprised at the personality that emerges from those two sources? What were we thinking?
Yeah,
Oh
it's an interesting
man,
pitch, isn't it? If you were like, let's write the national curriculum purely on the basis of angry extremist social media posts, I'm sure the kids will turn out fine.
I get um I get quite upset sometimes when I look at what people are actually using AI for because it feels like such a waste of energy. And you know, I don't know, there are a lot of people much smarter than me who always say like AI in and of itself is not evil. It's all about, the data that we feed it and the guiding principles and the rules that we give it and our own constraints that we put around it. But I have some really, really smart friends that work in, ethical AI considerations, and they develop ethical, frameworks and the inclusion, diversity, equity side of it as well. And I just like if there's one thing I hope to see in this year, 2026, it's more companies taking seriously the constraints and the ethics that they need to put around AI. That's my hope.
As bleak as the outlook looks regarding that, I do think the
Mm,
pendulum is swinging the other way. There is quite a lot of backlash at the moment around unethical corporations. I think people are growing quite tired and sharpening their guillotines. So I'm hopeful.
Chris's prediction is like a social revolution in the style of the French.
All, guys, all we need to do is eat one billionaire, and the rest will fall in line. I promise.
Mm.
You heard it
I
here
have a
first.
lot of strong feelings about the tech
The PayPal
bazillionaires.
mafia. Yeah.
But it's interesting, right? I feel like our friend Elon has got quieter over the last few months, right? Having been the subject of everyone's favorite poking last year with things. I don't feel like I've heard from him at all. No, the things
He
he's
couldn't get
dealing with
any
lawsuits and
louder.
stuff.
I think he peaked.
Yeah.
Lawsuits and ketamine keep him busy these days.
Mm. I find so like speaking of Elon, one of my favorite exercises to do when I'm working with executives around AI and the importance of leadership in AI is I tell everyone to pick who they think is an ideal leader in the age of AI. Without a doubt, somebody in the room picks Elon. And I love when they do because there are actually some really incredible things about Elon, right? If you think about where he came
No
from and
doubt,
where
sure.
he's gotten, if you
Yeah.
think about his visionary capabilities, if you think about his ability to get things done, but then you can quickly turn and say, okay, well, what about the ethical side? His AI is probably one of the most unconstrained versions out there, and it does some pretty terrible things. And so the argument is it acceptable for a leader if they're a visionary, right? Maybe they have extreme clarity, to use the words I like. You know, his clarity in the future is incredible. He has probably very little empathy or compassion, right?
Hmm.
And he has a lot of courage. So is that leader good or bad? I don't know. It ends up being such a great conversation about how we have to think about leadership differently.
And my takeaway from the last 20 years, and last 200 years as well, is that the
Just the
people that
one,
are,
Chris. One takeaway.
sure, the people that are good at blitz scaling aren't necessarily the best people to be running large scale things.
That's right.
Right? Move fast and break things is a great motto for a startup, for a plucky startup. When you're responsible for trillions of dollars and billions of people, stop breaking things. We need someone that can fix things, can maintain things, can nurture things. It's just a different
Mm.
mindset we need to change.
How do you judge the pivot? Like when do you know like to shift from break stuff to stable?
The guillotines kit.
So
Yeah.
user feedback, I think is what I'm hearing, Chris.
Yes,
Right?
user feedback reaches a critical point.
Hmm. Yeah, it is an interesting challenge, isn't it? I mean, I remember someone writing about the pace of autonomous vehicle driving in China and comparing like to like in the US or something and going like, hey, look, the Chinese delivery vehicles are going through wet concrete and people going like, no, that's success. They're accepting failure so they can get the algorithm generation quicker. It's just that their degree of acceptance of failure is much higher. As we've seen with SpaceX,
Mm.
right? Another Elon Musk. You're gonna like that thing. I do find that we perhaps overcredit Elon with all of the doings in his companies. I'm sure there's some other smart people in SpaceX who
Oh,
pursue
the
that
quiet
kind of
people. This
race.
is it, right? For every guy who's constantly on Twitter telling you what he thinks, there's 1,000 engineers working very hard in the background getting the thing done. So,
Mm. Actually, Emily, you were speaking about exercise for groups. One of my favorite ones is like a switching hats one we do in product owner training, where and we'll always start with everyone attacking a business problem, and like you get a lovely variety of like replacing checkbooks through to like AI implementation, but everyone always kind of solves it as themselves. And
Mm.
consistently, the most interesting one is when you assign a different personality for the team to inhabit and solve in the guise of them. And some of my favorite, like Donald Trump is probably my favorite personality to assign to people because it's really great when you see people go like, I can solve it as Trump. Well, if I was Trump, I would do this. And it's really nice to see them like be unshackled of their all of their personality that they normally attach priorities to for one of those kind of like folk who are willing to go out there.
Yeah, I love that too. I mean, like in the whole compassion exercise that I do, it is a bit like that, right? It's like, okay, take off your CTO hat and now put on the hat of, a marketing analyst that just sits at their computer all day, doing analysis and research. And what does that feel like? And if you were that person, what would you do differently? Like it's so good if we can find a way to actually like step outside of ourselves and like experience life a little bit like someone else. I think like the one, if I had to choose my takeaway from what was it, did you say, Chris? 200 years? 20
sure.
years?
You could do
Either.
200 if you want, Emily. Like you can one
200
up
is a
Chris by
long
10,
time.
10x Chris.
It's a long, long time. I'll go with 20 years. Um, Anytime you get people out of their head and into their like physiology, they really learn. And, I've seen Kit do that so many times well, getting people up and moving and interacting. Or, with leadership teams, one thing I've done a lot is like a listening tour. So you take them out of their office, you transport them someone new, they're going to all these new buildings, all their senses are activated, and you just learn incredibly. Like, sitting at a computer all day reading stuff and looking at stuff isn't enough. Like, the more you get your physiology involved, the better you learn. And you learn in a very like deep way. Like, you actually build new beliefs that way, not just, more cognitive knowledge. So I love any exercise like that. I think they really work.
Yeah, very good. Sort of related to being physical, one of my favorite learnings about you, I think this was relatively soon to learn you, was you were a cheerleader, right? And in my head, like an Olympic
Mm.
cheerleader, but you might need to ground us a little bit around things. Like what did cheerleading teach you that you now bring into this world of experience? I feel like it's going to be more than one might suspect from the initial kind of pitch.
I mean, I loved cheerleading. Like, it was such a good way of like learning and adapting, and you're learning routines and you're on the floor. And I love performing. I've always loved performing. Um, but, when you're teenage girls, that's a hard time in a woman's life. And you all have to interact, and you're showing up to practice every day, and you're bringing your work drama or your school drama or your boyfriend drama. And there's a lot on the line. When you're stunting, you're throwing a girl in the air. And if if you do something wrong, they can get, she can get really, really hurt. So I think what it taught me is, one, how to get along with people, especially when they're not their best, especially when they're having a bad day. It taught me to really appreciate the role that I have. So in stunting, I was always the back. I was the one that held onto the girl's ankles, then had one hand on the tailbone, propped her up, and my job was to keep my eyes on her tailbone and make sure it never went over my head. And then I was responsible to catch her, back and her head, which is obviously a very important part of a human's body. And you had to show up in that role and take that role really seriously and be the best, in that role. And then it also just like, I guess, taught me how to have fun. Like, it was so fun. And as a team, we had so much fun together. And whether we were at a game or we were at practice, we were always laughing, we were always giggling. There were always, it actually, now that I think about it, and I wouldn't have thought about this before, you actually taught me a lot about agile, right? And agile teams and Scrum and all those sort of things. And as a team, you have rituals that you do. I think what cheerleading taught me is the importance of having those rituals, that sort of, you know, I don't know, or how you get to know each other, how you communicate, how you prepare together, how you execute well together. The ritual side was really important too.
People
It's
like a
interesting because
cadence, right? They look things
you,
around it.
you, you're talking about the routine and the ritual. So when you have like a set thing you need to do and the safety, that's the time. And then when you're trying to
Mm,
train people to break the paradigm, you break that ritual. Get out from your desk, move, go somewhere else, work with another
mm.
team, and have another thing. So there's a time for both, right? There's a season for both.
Yes, and I think the one thing it taught me about myself is that I'm I'm probably not the person that's going to be the CEO, but you make me the chief of staff to the CEO, and that's going to be the best CEO you've ever had. Like, my role in life is really like, I feel like I'm a cheerleader. I'm a cheerleader for those leaders that are having to make, hard decisions about AI in their workforce. Like, I'm a cheerleader, for my boss. Like, that really is my best role, and I love it.
I think the happiest teams I've seen are ones where they don't try and make everyone everything, and it's to go
Yeah.
like. So yeah, I think it is a balance. You don't want people to be pigeonholed and be like you only do this one thing, but like accepting that we don't ask Chris to be the detail person that over here I'm gonna pick like from that stuff, right? He's not gonna have a good time. We're not gonna get the result, but we put him out there like doing his sales acting job. Think great times around stuff there, and over the past few months doing our podcast, unexpectedly like technical the kind of degrees of detail in things, right? So there's like different slices of you could bring, but we don't want you to do everything on a team if you want to be happy when it's a
Mm.
human around things.
I will say, just based on the topic of this podcast, I do think in the next couple of years we're going to start to see some really unique work structures and work systems start to evolve. Like I've looked into this and read about this a lot, and tried to even generate my own thinking around it because I see a lot of people leaving the corporate world and sort of doing their own thing. And in, these AI native organizations, there's a lot of like new businesses that are going to start popping up. I think businesses have an opportunity to become more decentralized than they are today. I think we might see remote work, flexible work, fractional work become more and more popular. Like there's going to be some really unique work systems that start to arise out of this time.
Mm. And the organizations that prioritize that actual productivity and the humans having a nice time, I think it'd be really interesting there. I had my first experience of pairing with an AI before Christmas because we had an unexpected workload and like I had to learn some analytics, which is new for me in something, and like there was no one else around. So my other pair was an AI. And I did find it really interesting how quickly I could do stuff and it shifted the work pattern around things. So I feel like probably like that balance can be interesting. What other sort of shapes of business do you think we're going to see, Emily? Like, have you got any specific predictions based on what you've seen? Holocracy was the popular one not so long ago.
Well, I did ask for some business and legal advice before I started my own company to try to understand different structures and how that might change, the way that I registered my company and thought about my company and all the different types of employment, that there are in Australia as well. Um, and like, I think the word is collective. What I'm finding is that there are a lot of people that sort of have their own businesses and are very smart in their own thing, but are finding ways to come together and work together. And that doesn't mean you start a company together, but it's sort of the flexibility around I can do the one thing I love and I'm really good at. I can also partner with, my friend who owns the AI tech company, and I can partner with my friend who does the psychotherapy and the neuroscience, and we can do something really cool together. I have a really great friend who is unbelievably brilliant in inclusion, diversity, and equity. I've recently made, friends with two female founders who have an ethical AI community. We all have our own businesses, but how can we come together to solve a problem and sell something? So I call that collective. It's sort of like we form around a problem and collectively solve it. And then once we've solved it, we go off again and sort of decentralize. And there's a lot more fluidity. And now you don't see that, I think, yet in big companies. But now that I'm operating in sort of this different startup-y, smaller business space, I'm seeing a lot of that. And I think the people that are doing that are really happy because they get agency to do what they love. They get flexibility, to sort of choose when they do and don't engage. They're teaming and they're learning new things every time and collaborating. And it's this really cool space. And I'm loving it
I feel
Yeah,
there's exciting potential in what AI can do to reduce the friction of you doing that forming and setting up thing, right?
completely.
So if I think about like why is that a pain, especially 3 years ago, like let's say still now I'd argue in some ways, but it's like, oh, I can't share the file in the right way for Emily to edit it and then do our pay and all that. And it's like,
yeah.
well, gee, that sort of stuff we can take away now, right? Or we're getting
And and
very
every
interesting stuff.
organization used to have its own style of communication and culture and
Yeah.
ways of working. And now, as a fractional CMO at the moment, I'm finding that because people are using AI, um, I can get tangible results and proof of concept much quicker. So I can just like plug in and be like, okay, guys, here's what I've been learning from similar companies to yours. And so here's a quick takeaway. I'll give you that document up for starters, right? Immediately prove value off the bat. And then I can get talking to the people about, okay, so what's working, what's not, why. And yeah, no, it's funny that you said that, Emily, because that's exactly what I've noticed in the last 6 months with my work is just
Hmm.
that's been the frictionless path of least resistance. Whenever I'm doing that, there's just lots of opportunities and lots happening. And so it seems to be
Yeah.
that is the way the economy is drifting.
Have you
So,
got an AI that can de-thread Slack for you yet, Chris? So that when other people like threads, you don't have to see them.
but I'm sure I should make an app for that. I'll vibe code it.
I mean, I feel lucky that I started a business in this time because I can be AI native And I've had successes and I've had failures. Like I tried to use Lovable for my website, and after spending about 2 weeks and like not getting the outcome I wanted and not understanding why, and the performance wasn't great, I finally, called a friend and said, "Hey, I really need some support. Like, can you help me create this website?" But social media is another place where I've used AI. I don't use it to create my posts. And I do not use it to like curate exactly what I'm going to do. I'm choosing to do that in a very human led way and making it very intentional and authentic, but it's helped me to organize my thoughts. It's given me great advice on when to post, when not to. Sometimes it does give me some ideas that I may or may not utilize. I haven't utilized very many of them, but I've used it for the copyright that I use on things sometimes. I use it in, from a financial planning aspect. Like the amount that I can do as a founder leveraging AI is pretty incredible. I think if I haven't posted about this on LinkedIn yet, I think I did actually. I've used it to help me figure out if I manifest a certain day in the life for me as a founder, like what I want my day in the life to really look like, on the 1st of December, what's the path to get there? And like from a what offerings do I need to put in the market? What do I need to do operationally? From a confidence and neuroscience standpoint, like, and it gave me this entire plan that was like, Emily, if you want to manifest your dreams by this date, here's all the things you need to do to get there. And it was actually pretty good. So I feel quite lucky because it's allowing me to do so much more with my business than I would have been able to, 2 years ago if I had left and done this.
Yeah, I
Amazing.
feel.
We've got. Sorry, Kit, go for it.
I, I my only reflection of that was I think what AI or the current generation of AI is really good at is helping you set up the hypotheses and then test them quickly. It's
Yeah.
that like and like reflecting on me using it for my analytics coding kind of like problem, it was rarely right, but it helped me pick up the problems really quickly and attack and move through. And I
Oh,
feel
but
like with your road mapping thing, I can really relate to that.
there's nothing better than being wrong though, right? If you ask someone for
Yes.
advice and they go, "Oh yeah, you should just dump your wife and be a single guy at 50," you're like, "No, that's terrible advice, dude." But just hearing that makes it very clear in your head, like, "Okay,
Yes.
good, I know a path forwards." So
Yeah,
I'm
maybe
very
the value
conscious.
is providing terrible advice that you
Yeah,
don't
and you're like,
disagree
okay,
with and take your own
now
action.
now I know where my heart lies. Good, fine. So I'm aware we're overrunning. So I think
Mm.
a lot of this is very big and ambitious, and I just wondered like, what's a smallest step that a leader could take this week to start walking down the right path?
Get really clear on what's the legacy that you want to leave behind. Get really clear on why, like, what is your purpose and how can you serve that purpose through your work? I think if we all, whether you're a leader or not, if we all just took a little bit more time to get grounded in that, I think we would be creating a lot of really magical, special things through the work that we're doing. And I think that's where it starts.
Amazing. Have you got time for some quick fire questions?
Are they going to be about tea?
Sure.
All of mine were about tea. Chris might have some others.
Okay.
They're good for the outtakes anyway, right? For things.
Sure.
Okay, I'll ask some tea ones whilst Chris thinks.
Which famous historical person would you like to take tea with and why?
Marilyn Monroe. She had a really hard life. And I really would just like to have a chat with her. And yeah, I have a lot of empathy for her.
She was incredibly smart, right?
Incredibly smart, incredibly bad with relationships, definitely not inwardly sound, but pretty charismatic and brilliant in how she approached acting.
Kit.
Uh, m- Minor minor irritation. Milk in tea, essential or hideous sin? Let's see whether it
Essential,
generates essential.
delicious. Yes.
Uh, it's the classic. Like it's that organizational thing of like, oh, but it feels so good. Should we stick with the policy even there? Okay. What do we have? Oh, actually, no, this is a good one. So the tea break used to be a sacred pause in the day. The Swedes even have fika where they do cake and things. Are we losing out through abandoning the sacred breaks?
Yes.
And I
Done.
think
As
We introduced them.
well, it's
as an
something I miss about
American,
office culture, right? Like with everyone working from home remotely, there's not
yeah.
that
In the
water
US,
cooler moment.
we didn't really have tea breaks or even coffee breaks. I remember my first day in Australia, I was like, where the hell is everyone? Why do they keep leaving? And that was probably one of the most beautiful things is the fact that you and your coworkers would leave and go get a cuppa together, whether it's coffee or tea. And it was a 10, 15-minute break. And you'd often sit and have a chat. Like that blew my mind. I think it's beautiful and we need to do more of it.
I picked up smoking my first job in the Atlassian ecosystem just because you connect so much with coworkers on the cigarette
Yeah.
break. It was incredible.
Yeah,
Disclaimer: this
definitely.
podcast is not endorsing taking up smoking. To
We are
introduce
looking for
smoking today.
sponsors though, Big Tobacco.
Take
Okay, do this. I think that's enough of the quick fire tea related questions. Ooh, you covered lots of things. There we go.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Emily. Really thought provoking. I really enjoyed it.
I mean, you guys are great. And I love that you're doing this podcast. And I think it's really important. And obviously, I'm one of Kit's biggest fans. Chris, I'll be a fan of yours as well. Whenever you guys need a cheerleader, please come let me know.
We'd be honored. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Very good.
Nailed
Okay,
it.
I will now stop the recording. We'll see whether it prompts us to do anything.